welcome also from my side, Minister Goyal. It's a fantastic opportunity to have you on stage here. Having the opportunity in times like this to talk to the Indian minister responsible for all of these questions is probably a fantastic opportunity that shouldn't be missed. But I know we have only 19 minutes and 47 seconds, and I have a lot of questions for you. So we have to see that we can get through some of them. I would like to start with the tariffs, move on to China, and then talk a little bit about free trade agreements. So maybe let's start with the tariffs right now. There are people that argue that the tariffs are a huge opportunity for India. That this kind of provides you with a situation where your comparative advantage is moving quite high. I have to say, under these circumstances, I probably don't envy you, because this is almost like, let me use a football reference because I'm European, but it's like a penalty without a goalie. And if you miss, that's a really bad one. So what are the reforms that you are striving for now internally to actually maximize and capitalize on the opportunity that is there, the situation is presenting?
Thank you, Yanka, and thank you, Carnegie and the Foreign Ministry, for giving me an opportunity to meet this august audience. Undoubtedly, it's a great opportunity for India to reset its trading relations, particularly with the US. India today is an economy that's growing at the fastest pace amongst the large economies in the world. We are fifth largest, will become the third largest another 2 years from now, 2.5 years. Currently, 4 trillion will become about 35 trillion in that band by 2047. So look at the delta of opportunity that India offers. In the next 2.5 decades, we'll be almost growing 8 times and have a huge population of 1.4 billion aspirational young Indians, providing domestic demand and an opportunity to enjoy the benefits of scale. And that's something which we understand, that's something which our partners understand. And therefore, I think it's not for small measure that in the last 2 years, at least 8 delegations from across the world, almost each one of them between 70 to 130 people, have visited India, and these business delegations are engaged with our counterparts. So I think there's a huge opportunity for India to bring in investments, expand our trading relationships, and then along with that, look at services, look at integrating our economy with the developed world, provide a better deal to our consumers. Ultimately, all of this leads to benefit for our consumers. This also helps us to ensure that the tariff protection that we have kept is more directed towards non-market economies or those whom we cannot trust for their kind of trading, unfair trading practices. So we'll really be in a position now to set up bilaterally with different countries, and we are engaged with many countries or blocks of countries, better trading relations that will also spur greater investment in India, that will encourage demand and revenues for the India operations. It also helps us bring in quality and sustainability at the core of our future business practices. So in a way, we are totally rewriting the rules of working in India and encouraging businesses to adopt globally accepted good manufacturing practices.
And is this pressure that this sort of emanates, is that good for the reform process here domestically?
There's no pressure. Who's under pressure?
No, I mean just in terms of the pressure that is exerted by the fact that you have so much opportunity in front of you.
That's not a pressure. That's a very exciting position to be in. Bear in mind that our global trade or our exports account for a very small percentage of our GDP at present. Even within our exports, we are quite a bit import dependent for the products that we are exporting. So if we look at COVID, when exports fell, our imports fell even faster, and we landed up with a trade surplus. So I think Indians have over a long period of time been sitting in a very cozy comfort of a large domestic market, giving them huge business opportunities. Now there's this youth, the aspirational young man or woman who wants to look at the big things. And now they're looking at expanding their operations to the world. They're looking at expanding the scale of their operation, the breadth of their operation. And therefore, I think it's exciting times. And whenever I meet our business persons, as I did on the 9th afternoon, before the pause, to understand from my exporters and the captains of industry what the mood is, I saw them very, very bullish.
So you mentioned trade surplus, the word. That brings me as a German immediately to think about China. Because I think we have very similar problems at the moment. We have a huge trade deficit that we run with China. You have the same problem. We have a problem of massive overcapacities that are potentially flooding our markets, yours and ours. Yours is slightly better protected than ours at the moment, I would say, but it's going to come. There's a big wave there. And we have the question of FDIs, Chinese FDI in the country, and possibly a slightly split opinion about that in our respective business communities. Some think, oh, this is a huge opportunity, we want to capitalize on that, and some think, oh, this is very dangerous and is going to lead to deindustrialization and is going to lead to our companies running out of business. What is your take on the current situation, the normalization process that we're seeing? Is India going soft on China, or is India going tougher on China? Where is this heading?
India will protect its interests. For us, it is India first. Whatever is in our interest, we will recalibrate our policy accordingly. As of now, there's hardly any foreign direct investment from China in India.
And it will stay that way?
It was the same 25 years, in the last 25 years, even when it was open. Not too much Chinese investment has come to India, nor are we encouraging any significant investment coming in from China at all. At the moment, that is the policy. Our effort is to integrate our economies with the developed world who believe in fair play, who believe in honest business practices, and where we get an equal opportunity to do business and invest. Everything will be based on reciprocity. Everything will be based on mutual trust and mutual benefit. And therefore, I think I personally don't see any great disturbance, save and except for a short period of time. I think this reset that the world is going through is actually very good for the world. I said it the other day. In my humble view, the genesis of this entire problem goes back to the late 80s and mid 90s, when China was accepted in the World Trade Organization. And MFN benefits were given to China by all countries of the world collectively, with the desire and hope that we could trust them to behave better. Sadly, that never happened, and over the years, country after country and industrial sector after sector has realized how their practices have hurt businesses and economies. And I think the best endorsement of what India did in 2019, when we decided not to join the RCEP and stay out of this regional grouping, because we felt that the guiding principles on which free trade should work were not being respected, is today being vindicated by the current situation in the world.
Do you feel like there is going to be more pressure? Because we've seen this before, that there are problems, then the Chinese won't let the sort of engineers come out that are needed, the specialized workers that are needed, that there are then export restrictions vis-a-vis India. Do you think that there is an expectation that China will want to share some of the pain that the 145 plus X tariffs will exert on their economy?
Well, I cannot comment on what they would like to do, but I can only say that India today has a huge talent pool. We produce the highest number of STEM graduates every year. 43% of them are women. And very often, necessity encourages innovation. Necessity drives people to outperform themselves. And therefore, should there be a situation where any such undue pressure is brought on the Indian ecosystem. Our Indian people are very competent to come out of it and innovate, do R&D, and create solutions for our own needs, which will, I think, probably be better than what China can offer us.
So this is the kind of optimism that I've been hearing for the last 2 days here in India. I think this is sort of the main message that is being presented. Let's move on maybe to the free trade question, because this is about more than a bilateral trade agreement with the US, a free trade agreement with the EU, a bilateral trade deal with the UK. All of that is nice and well, but in the end, I guess we can both agree that this is a band-aid to a kind of gaping wound in the global trading order, that we have a bigger problem at hand there that is kind of that the WTO is crumbling underneath our feet. So we are having a situation in which India now plays a very important role in the global economy. What is your vision for a global trading order that we come out, because you were so optimistic about this, what is the Indian vision for how trade is supposed to look like in the next 5 years?
I don't think the entire world can be looked at from one lens. End of the day, we will have to recognize there are a large number of countries which are less developed nations, LDCs as we call them. They really need to have affirmative action from the rest of the world to help take people out of poverty and help those economies develop. Then we have the mid-income or the developing countries who also will need a transition time to be able to come up to levels of decent prosperity. And I think that will be a responsibility that will be cast on the developed world to give enough elbow room and enough ability for such nations to catch up with the developed world. That will be a challenge that WTO will have to navigate. Unless that is recognized, it will be very difficult to come to a consensus agreement on many issues at the WTO.
Is there still trust in the WTO here in India? Because in Europe, we're talking a lot about sort of the death of the WTO system, that it's no longer working, that it doesn't serve our purposes. Is India ready to defend the WTO?
We have always believed in multilateral organizations. We have always supported them, and we believe they have a very important role to play. So India will continue to work within the framework of global rules of business and trade. I think the WTO will have to also reform itself on a few items which also the Trump administration in its first term had flagged off, and a few items on which I also feel that we need to recognize that it needs improvement. For example, just as a case in point, we could look at the fact that the definition of developing countries. Now, if countries with per capita income of $50,000, and if I'm not mistaken, maybe one with $100,000 per capita income, chooses, since there's a self-declaration, to call itself a developing nation, then obviously it is going to cause angst amongst the rest of the world or the developed world. And actually it causes angst even for the developing countries, because those people hurt, those countries hurt our interests. And the developed world then takes a macro view, or the lens of the developed world towards the developing countries gets tainted. So I think it would be only fair that some kind of a benchmark could be set, or at least those countries who have now reached pretty good levels of prosperity take a more realistic view of their own status. And similarly, there are other areas. For example, we've had a lot of disconnect at the WTO on e-commerce transactions, the moratorium on e-commerce. Now, we are not per se against it. Our problem is that we had an ITA-1 agreement earlier, which was not properly defined what comes within the ITA-1. And it kept getting expanded to cover more and more items, causing loss or the lack of ability for countries like India to develop our own ecosystem. So I think e-commerce moratorium needs to be well defined, what it will cover and limit it there, and what it will not cover. But anything beyond that also will not be covered. Some such realistic definitions are needed. On agriculture, there are certain decisions taken 10 years ago, 12 years ago, not yet implemented. Unless those get implemented, how can we move forward to other areas? So fisheries, we are trying to come to a consensus on fishery without really addressing the real problem of overfishing in the waters. Because who did the overfishing? And those who are the polluters or who did the overfishing need to downscale what they've done already. They need to give elbow room and space for others. Otherwise, if you look at a standstill on what's happening today, then those who are overfishing will continue to overfish for the rest of their life. And countries like India, which are emerging economies, will never get a chance.
Are you worried that the bilateral trade agreement with the US or the trade agreement with the EU will undercut, in the end, the WTO order? I mean, these are not solutions.
Why they are permitted by the WTO? We are all working within the framework of the WTO. I don't think anybody in any of the bilateral engagements is talking beyond the realm of what is allowed in the WTO.
So let's talk about these bilateral trade agreements a little bit. The US one first. Is there a timeline on that?
You know, I've answered this question very often. You always need to have timelines for or deadlines for whatever work we do. We do that in business all the time, don't we? Every action should be defined in terms of a responsibility matrix, a timeline. But in the case of free trade agreements, these are indicative timelines. We aspire for those timelines, but end of the day, it has to be a win-win for both sides. It has to be a fair, equitable and balanced solution. Just to meet a deadline, you cannot compromise national interest.
What are the stumbling blocks on the US one?
Well, we don't discuss free trade agreement negotiations on a Carnegie Mellon
I can try.
platform.
Let's move to the EU agreement, because I'm from Europe. Of course, there's a huge interest in working closer with India. We're under enormous pressure at the moment. You are basically the one anchor for our diversification agenda. What is your priority? What are your priorities for the negotiations now that are seemingly having a lot of speed behind them now after the visit that has taken place here?
Well, I think the good part is there's an excellent team which is negotiating with India. Marosh Sherkovich is an absolutely fantastic person to work with. And if somebody can pull off this free trade agreement, I think he can. And the President of the European Commission has expressed, along with Prime Minister Modi, a desire that we conclude by the end of the year. And we are working to try and make that happen. Having said that, my sense is we'll be able to complete most of the discussions quite amicably. There will be two areas on which the European Union will have to rethink. One is these non-trade issues which they seek to superimpose into trade agenda. Unless they get that out of their system, and the European Commission will need to reflect on it, they'll find it very difficult to get a trade agreement with anybody whatsoever. Any self-respecting, decent country cannot sign up on commitments which are irrational, beyond the realm of trade, and where the rest of the world has been responsible for the problem in the first place and are sought to be put on our head as if it's our responsibility to resolve.
You mean particularly climate regulation?
Particularly climate regulation. And secondly, Europe today is in a crisis, in my humble opinion, because of the severity of the non-tariff barriers that Europe has created. Even the United States has talked about it. Unless Europe recognizes the path that they're going down, if I can even say downhill with, I see serious difficulty for Europe to be able to do trade with any country, forget India. And I'm actually a worried man for the very future of the European Union and their businesses, given the kind of dramatically difficult non-tariff barriers that they have set up both for their own businesses and for the rest of the world.
Now, you started with so much optimism, and now we're getting all pessimist on the European Union now. That's unfortunate
I'm
for
not
us, I would say.
pessimist. I'm just trying to give a wake-up call for Europe. You know, when I talk to European business persons or talk to ministers in front of European business persons, they all come and tell me, you sound as if you are our representative, not the representative of India. Almost unanimously, every business in Europe is in distress because of these non-tariff barriers and regulations. Unless the European Union sits down and addresses this, I can see a severe decline in the European Union and its future with self-imposed injury. End of the day, what will happen is Europe will be an island in between. The rest of the world will trade with each other, and Europe will have to look after itself.
I was going to say on this happy note, because we're out of time, but allow me one more question. So if there was a nice fairy coming to you and saying to you, you have one wish, one trade agreement you can hope for, one gets finished immediately, like you just click your heels. Is it the US one, the Europe one, or the UK one?
Well, you know, every parent loves every child equally.
I take that. Thank you very much, Minister Goyal. It was a great pleasure to talk to you.